We have a disproportionate problem in the state of Michigan. And so we could take the same kinds of actions other states have, but it doesn't rise to the challenge we're confronting. And that's precisely why we have to take a more aggressive stand. It's working.
Governor Whitmer on NBC's Meet the Press. Canadian police saying 17 people, including a lone gunman, are dead after a shooting rampage across the province of Nova Scotia that started Saturday night. The suspect engaging in a 12-hour rampage, one police officer among the victims. Another officer was hurt. No motive yet for the attack. Canada's worst mass murder in the nation's history. Police saying the suspect apparently dressed up as an RCMP officer and randomly targeted individuals. A massive storm being predicted for parts of Alabama into the morning hours.
The potential is going to be kind of confined near the Gulf Coast, where there's still warm, moist air and better instability is existing overnight.
Forecaster Nick Nausler at the National Storm Prediction Center. America's listening to Fox News.
One of the easiest ways to prevent the spread of COVID-19 is to wash your hands with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. Let this message help you time it. Start soaping up now. Disinfecting high-touch surfaces daily is key to preventing the spread of viruses. Use solutions with at least 70% alcohol. Some disinfectant brands that have products that meet the EPA's criteria for use against the coronavirus include Clorox, Ecolab, Kimberly-Clark, Lysol, Purell, and SC Johnson. Choice Broadcasting reminds you to stay safe and stay clean. You can rinse now.
If you've ever struggled for breath, you know what a scary experience it is. Whether you have asthma, emphysema, COPD, lung cancer, or another respiratory illness, the right medical treatment makes all the difference. GRMC's Pulmonology Clinic has the latest technology and respiratory equipment, staffed by world-class pulmonologists. Make an appointment today with GRMC's Pulmonology Clinic and start breathing easier. GRMC, where patients are partners.
Cocoa Coffee Company mugs are now here. Show pride for your island as you enjoy your delicious Circle K coffee. Each generously sized 16-ounce mug is etched with Guam-inspired images like Chief Godao, Serena, Two Lovers, and many more. The Cocoa Coffee Company mug collection is available for a limited time only, so don't miss out. Get yours today and collect them all. Exclusively available at Circle K locations. A portion of the proceeds go toward the Cocoa Bird Recovery Program.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. I never get tired of saying that. It's something that needs to be said. It needs to be said every day. It needs to be said every day so that we don't forget that we have a Constitution and a Bill of Rights that is the foundation of our individual freedom, which at this particular time is a little bit in peril. So it's helpful to go back and remember the basics. We do have a constitutional right to keep arms in our houses for personal protection, and we have a right of free speech and the right to exercise religion. As things sit right now with the Wuhan virus in town, and this is not just a Guam phenomenon, those who Ray would label as tin pot dictators are using the Wuhan virus excuse to increase their powers, and when they increase their powers, they decrease your freedom, all in derogation of that Constitution and Bill of Rights that we hold in such high regard. So that's one of the reasons that we do Tall Tales here every day, except for Saturday and Sunday, and we don't do it on Saturday and Sunday. And boy, do we regret it. The real Joe Cruz and I, just struggle through Saturday and Sunday because there's no tall tales, no opportunity to relate to our international radio listening audience. Somehow we make it, and we made it this time. We made it through a weekend, and we're back. Monday's our favorite day because we know we've got a whole week of tall tales ahead of us. So, as you well know, the way we start tall tales is something called Zemi Ikotni. And you know, I could just record this and allow the real Joe Cruz to play back the recording because it's almost the same rap every day. And it goes something like this. Well, the Daily News has an opinion page, but they don't put editorials on it, real editorials that relate to Guam. Instead of doing that, they run boilerplate from USA Today editorial board or Gannett News Service. Today is no exception. They did it again. How many times have I said that? Really? I say that almost as often as I read the Second Amendment. So today it's misplaced priorities. Oh yeah, and not only is it Gannett News Service or USA Today, 99% of the time it is a chronic example of Trump derangement syndrome. The Gannett and USA Today motto is, if you can't say something bad about Trump, and just don't say anything at all. So today it's misplaced priorities. Why does Trump want to hike fuel prices? Here we go. So instead of wasting a lot of time on that, I'm going to once again divert. And instead of spending any time at all on the Daily News editorial, a tribute to a journalist that just passed away here a couple days ago. His name is Abed E. Yunus. And he is the gentleman that started the Marianas Variety in 1972. Back in, if you had been in Saipan in 1972, there wasn't a whole lot there. It was not the Saipan that sprang up later on. It was not much there, but Mr. Yunus had the faith in Saipan. He started up a newspaper, hired a lot of people who have done very well as journalists, not only there but here. Later on, he moved the Marianas, or actually started selling the Marianas Variety on Guam, hired reporters to report on Guam news. For quite some time, the Marianas Variety was printed in Saipan and flown down here every day and distributed. Mr. Yunus then bought the necessary equipment to print the paper here, and he printed the Marianas Variety here for quite some time. And I don't remember exactly how long ago, about 3 years ago, I think, maybe a little longer ago, the Marianas Variety was purchased by the Cortec Group. So Cortec bought the Marianas Variety from Yunus and renamed it the Post, the Guam Daily Post, and hired some really good people to run it. And apparently Cortec said, you guys go ahead and run it. And they've done a crackerjack job. They've really done very well. So when Yunus started in 1972, the Daily News was the big guy in town. You know, it was very it took a lot of courage to compete with the Daily News. Even though the Daily News was printed here, it had circulation in Saipan. So there is an article in the Marianas Variety by Zaldi Dandan, who's the current editor for the Variety, And some of the things that he said about Eunice are some things that the daily. I'm really glad I can read this instead of spending any time with the Daily News editorials, because they ought to be reading this themselves. They ought to be listening to this. And this is what Zaldi said about Abed Yunus. Then and now, Mariana's Variety opinions pages are singularly opinionated. And throughout its history, Mr. Yunus's newspaper has never flinched from taking a stand despite outright slanders as well as threats of lawsuits and boycotts. In the early 1990s, a now defunct newspaper ran an editorial that was severely criticized by some government officials, including advertisers. The newspaper stopped publishing editorials, but not the Variety. What Variety will always strive for, as Eunice once said, is to earn the trust of the reading public. We may have our own opinions, he said, but others are entitled to their own, and Variety is here to provide them a forum. So, rest in peace, Abed Yunus. You done good, and I don't know exactly how much of the DNA of the Mariana's Variety is still contained in the Guam Daily Post, but I can tell you this, they write darn good editorials, and they don't seem to be afraid of anybody, just like Dan said about Eunice. So, as I said, R.I.P. Abed Yunus. Okay, then we turn from there to the Post. And the editorial today, Guam should aim to test. Testing, 1, 2, 3. This is the message from the World Health Organization Director Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus. Well, if that's who it's from, I don't know how much credibility to give it, because other than being on first base, we can't say much good about who, right, Real Joe Cruz?
No, we can't, sir.
No. Trump is not even going to fund WHO anymore, and it appears that WHO is in bed with the Chinese. And rather than being a bulwark against the Wuhan virus, turned out to be just the opposite. But anyhow, that's what Mr. Tedros sent to the. That's the message he sent to the world recently, because Wuhan virus continues to spread from country to country with more than 2 million infected and a global death toll at 160,000 as of Sunday afternoon. On Guam, we have lost 5 lives, according to the official count. At least 2 other deaths may have been suspected Wuhan virus cases. I got to stop here for a second and mention this again for anyone who's tuning in to Tall Tales for the first time. In the Tall Tales lexicon, we don't talk about COVID-19. We call that malady what it should be called, the Wuhan virus. So no matter what the context is, it's the Wuhan virus. That's where it came from. For a small community like ours, the test suggestion is easier to implement than other more urban places. Mayors and politicians know where most everyone lives because they knock on doors come election time. Tracking the pandemic without mass testing and not knowing how many others must be isolated is similar to trying to solve a problem blindfolded. Reopening, as you were, we heard Governor Lulian Guerrero say last week that mass testing, or testing for all, is ultimately the goal. We hope this can be achieved without further wasting time. Now, when it comes to wasting time, I don't think anybody can top our Governor Leon Guerrero right now. She has 4 time-wasting factories here on our island, factories whose specialty is wasting time. And they, in order to maintain proper physical distance, they are drive-in facilities. So all you must do is drive into one of Lou Leon Guerrero's choke points, and you can waste a lot of time, as much as an hour and 15 minutes. So when it comes to wasting time, we're right up there kind of at the gold standard of wasting time. But the Daily News says, the Post says, we hope this can be achieved without talking about testing, without further wasting time. Well, once you get into the habit of wasting time, it's not that easy to break. We seem to be addicted to wasting time with our choke points here. As more rapid test kits have become available, the ones that have received FDA approval, and which the governor prefers, GovWam testing numbers should already be picking up pace. We should see dozens or more tests a day. Instead, testing has slowed in recent days. Maybe it's because the people who have to do the tests have to drive through those god-awful choke points. On Saturday, only 7 were tested. We do know there isn't a shortage of people who have asked to be tested. We have heard from people who have asked to be tested because they had a fever, were coughing, and experienced shortness of breath. But they're not senior citizens, who are the priority age group for GovWam. Well, it's nice to see that senior citizens do have some special treatment here. Some of the people who the Department of Public Health and Social Services have turned down were instead referred to private clinics. But without health insurance, some of those who are ill and want to get tested have instead opted to stay home. Recently, David Duong, instructor in global health and social medicine, there's a title for you, instructor in global health and social medicine at Harvard, noted in an interview featured on the World Economic Forum that the FDA's approval of the first Wuhan virus rapid test manufactured by Abbott Diagnostics, tests can be done anywhere and results are available within 15 to 30 minutes. This is a pretty big game changer. So now we will have to see how quickly it gets deployed, how and where it will be used, and at what price, Duong said to the World Economic Forum. Now the question for Guam is, how determined are our elected officials to conduct mass testing without further delay? Let's hope they're as determined to conduct mass testing as they are to set up choke points out on the road. There's a lot of determination there. Is Governor Lou Leon Guerrero asking the military for help to provide the island with mass testing similar to what was used to assess more than 4,000 sailors on the U.S. Teddy Roosevelt in about 2 weeks? When will the military help? And how many tests can it provide the community that took in thousands of sailors ashore instead of leaving them stranded on the warship? It doesn't take a genius to understand mass testing is needed before Guam can finally reopen to the world, even if in phases. It does not take a genius. So you don't have to be a genius to understand that mass testing is needed before Guam can finally reopen to the world. Reopening the island to tourism and air travel in general without mass testing is too great a risk to the health of everyone on Guam. Well, not up to your usual standards, Guam Daily Post. Not a bad editorial, but not a blue star. Blue star is never awarded by default. If it were, the Post would get it almost every day because the Daily News doesn't even sign up to play the game. Okay, so from there we go to the card. It's kind of a short card today. This is what I've got. I've got checkpoints versus common sense, which was on the card last week, but I've got something new to offer. I want to go back to the quarterbacks versus the public one more time. And then I have Leon Guerrero versus Leon Guerrero. And this is not a divorce case, although it certainly sounds like one with a style like that, Leon Guerrero versus Leon Guerrero. So if that doesn't fill up the program, then I'll go back to some of the items that have been on the card for quite a while that I haven't reached, such as Helen Middlebrook versus Perceived Wisdom and Andrew and Bill O'Reilly versus Big Government. Okay, so the first item on the card, quarterbacks versus the public. And this goes, once again, this is, I talked about this on Friday, but I think it's really important. It's a little bit on the esoteric side, so I think it needs to be emphasized, and that's why I want to come back to it again. We have a legislature. We elect members of our legislature every 2 years. There are 15 of them. We expect them to be conscientious senators and to do our bidding in a manner that we can understand what it is that they're doing. Now, I'm going to stop here for a second because I have a phone call from Martinez. Good afternoon, Martinez.
Bob, it's Martinez.
Yes, sir, Martinez.
Did I hear you this morning on the Ray Gibson show saying about worship that you think people should be able to congregate?
Yes.
Well, that's where you and Martinez and you got a difference of opinion. Here's my take on it.
Uh-huh.
You know, when people gather and get together, that's how you catch this stuff. You know about in Korea, this is right when it started. I mean, this is one of the main things. In a small church, one lady just kept on coughing all over the place, and 107 people got it and they spreaded it. They think that was the origin of it in South Korea. Now, and then you heard about the choir practice somewhere in the States where 42 got it out of 58 and 2 died. When people congregate, it's just bad. But here's the thing. You know, on Guam, all the time, on Channel 8 and 11, always one is on, sometimes both. You can watch the Bishop's High Mass at 9:30 on Sunday. And now just very recently, I guess they're going to do it for Sunday Mass for Saturday. I think at 6 or 6:30, Channel 6 Fox, Father Mike St. Anthony's Mass live. And I know of at least one Christian non-Catholic group that has services online. So it can be done that way. And I saw a great special last night about Anthony Fauci, the great scientist on this. And they asked him a question about worship, and he's more into like the individual worship, not the organization. So there's other alternatives, and there's no need for people to get together. I mean, if somebody starts coughing, especially in a church where it's closed and it could spread for, you know what I mean? That's my take.
Should we close down the grocery stores, Martinez?
Grocery, I just came from one this afternoon. Grocery stores are a necessity.
I see.
There's other ways to worship. You can watch it on TV. You can have it online.
Well, let me.
With grocery stores, you can't watch on TV. You got to go out and buy groceries.
Let me go through the same things that I said on Ray's program this morning. Okay.
Okay.
I start out with the First Amendment, which says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So the free exercise of religion is a fundamental right. So that's the starting point. Second point, since it is a fundamental right, then in order for it to pass any restriction on it to pass constitutional muster, it would be subject to strict scrutiny. There has to be a compelling state interest to get involved, to have an impact on free exercise of religion. Now, if it's possible to have grocery stores open under certain restrictions, that is, a limited number of people come in the store, methods to keep them 6 feet apart from everybody else. Wouldn't it be possible to do the same thing at a church? And the answer is yes. The answer is yes. You could do the same thing at a church. You could say,
you need people to go to church for service when you have this virus.
okay,
Remember,
but people can I finish? All right.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah. Okay. So what I'm saying is, you could have the same kinds of crowd control mechanisms at a church that you have at a grocery store. Only allow a certain number of people in. Based on the capacity of the building, mark off spaces. People have to maintain their distances, one from the other, etc. And if push came to shove, since the free exercise of religion is a fundamental right, I think it would be very difficult to defend the situation where you're closing the churches and allowing grocery stores to be open. Now, I heard what you said about, well, you got to go to the grocery store to eat. But for Catholics, watching Mass on TV doesn't do it. And if you heard the rest of what I said to Ray this morning, Catholics are to go to Mass once a week. Go to Mass and take communion, be in a state of grace and take communion. And according to Catholic doctrine, if you don't do that, it's a mortal sin, and if you die, you're going to go to hell. So the state is not supposed to get into religious dogma, the truth or falsity of it, etc. But the Constitution is quite clear that you have to have a free exercise of religion, and I think it would be very difficult to make an argument that if the church operated in the same manner as grocery stores do, that it's any more dangerous than the grocery store.
Well, I wasn't interrupt you. Just when you said, is it possible? You asking the question. We could go on and on, but you know the First Amendment. Part of it is, you want to prevent people from practicing their religion, but it's not to favor one religion over another. If we said a certain sect of religion can worship on Sunday during this coronavirus and another can't, you have a problem.
That's not what the First Amendment says, Mark. The First Amendment says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So that means any religion.
So you think if this went to court, the court could rule? Well, some states have done it, like Texas. I don't know about the courts, that they could have during this virus, but as long as they have safeguards, like you said. You think that could be the ruling?
Absolutely.
And then that would be for every denomination.
Well, when a party goes before the court for injunctive relief, the injunction is binding on the parties to the lawsuit. But once an injunction like that enters, then it would be very difficult not to open up, that same ruling to everybody else. But it doesn't happen ipso facto.
Well, let me end with this question. Let's say the court ruled that way, and then in one church they did that, but people were coughing and you get over 100 people infected and 10 die, and they spread it. Do you think a ruling like the court then might change its ruling?
Well, what if the same thing happened in a grocery store, Mark?
Yeah, here again, I go back to the necessity.
Well, again, that comes down to there's nothing in the Constitution that says everybody has free access to a grocery store. But there is a
watching church. If somebody physically, their health, they cannot go out to a church, you don't think watching it on TV is good enough?
No, it's not even close.
Then what do they do if it's too hard for them to go to a church?
Well, the way it's supposed to work is a Eucharistic minister comes to that person's house and administers the communion there.
But why can't they have that and also the service on TV?
So you're going to go out and do, how many?
We go on. Now, anyway, good to get your opinion on it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll be listening, Bob.
Okay, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's take a break here, and after the break, I'm going to come back to James.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point. One of the easiest ways to prevent the spread of COVID-19 is to wash your hands with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. Let this message help you time it. Start soaping up now. The virus can survive in the air for 3 hours, on copper for 4 hours, on cardboard for 24 hours, and on plastic and stainless steel for 72 hours. Disinfect phones and common household surfaces like tables, doorknobs, light switches, countertops, toilets, faucets, and sinks, desks, including computer keyboards and kids' toys. Choice Broadcasting reminds you to stay safe and stay clean. You can rinse now.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Security Title, making sure you actually own the property you think you just bought.
Welcome back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, Guam's single voice of reason. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Is this the James, Real Joe Cruz? Okay. Okay, so we're back, and we're on the air with the James. Good afternoon, James.
Good afternoon, Bob. I'd like to reiterate that your last caller, Mark, needs to understand that we have a Constitution that pretty much covers that along with all of our amendments. And our Constitution and those amendments are not rules for the people to follow. Those are rules for our government to follow how they work with the people. Thought I'd bring that up. But anyway, actually, I'm trying to be a good, responsible citizen. I'm staying here with Mom. She's 87. I'm taking care of her. I'm not letting anybody else go out of the house. I'm wearing my mask. I'm rubbed all of the hide off my hands from washing and scrubbing and sanitizing. I'm keeping my travels to an absolute bare necessities minimum, like getting her prescriptions refilled over at Navy Med and going to the grocery store and getting water, things we have to have. I just walked out of Payless, and I'm just curious if the Department of Office of Personnel Management has got a manpower study on how many man-hours it took to determine the items that have been declared quote-unquote non-essential that are on the right next to the aisle with the corned beef or the bread. I mean, you're already in the store, and I was going to get a birthday card for Mom, but that's been considered non-essential. I mean, she's 87. It may be her last birthday. Who knows? But I can't get my mom a birthday card, even though it's right next to the bread aisle, and I'm already in a store that's been declared as essential. However, a couple of aisles over, I took a trip down the booze and alcohol lane, and I guess booze and beer and alcohol and everything else has been declared essential because you can still buy that. But they had to have spent who knows how many actual man-hours determining what's essential, what's not essential, putting together a program, disseminating that program to all of the retailers in Guam, and then I'm assuming trying to enforce it, I guess. I would hope if all that money's been spent.
Probably some cost to the retailer too, James.
Absolutely. I mean, the store is open. It's been declared essential because it's, a supermarket, food, water, the whole thing. and these items are already there. You're not having to walk into another doorway. You're not having to walk down to another store. You're not having to make another additional stop. But there's several aisles of items inside the stores that have got big, huge tape across them that says these have been declared non-essential. But like I said, you can go right over and you can buy dog food and you can buy cat collars and you can get all the booze and wine and stuff you want out of the cooler. There's no tape over that saying that's not essential. I don't know.
I know the rationale, James. This is the rationale. If a person has to leave his home to go to a store and buy an essential item, that's a trip, and that's permissible. But if a person leaves his home to go to a store and buy a non-essential item, then that's an impermissible trip. And I think that's what the rule aims at, that they don't want to make a store too attractive by allowing it to sell non-essential items. My take on the whole thing is that if you are one of the younger folks that think socialism is such a good deal, this is a really good preview for you.
Oh yeah, this is an absolute dress rehearsal for kind of what it will be like in the future if we adopt socialism, which eventually always turns to communism, which always turns into a dictatorship. I absolutely 100%. This is a good dress rehearsal for that. I hope the young folks are paying attention and watching.
True enough, James. So,
but I would like to know how many man hours they spent trying to figure this all out for a store that's already open that has not been considered closable. Just a thought.
I know that the same rules, some states and cities have done the same thing. So you could go to Walmart, and you can buy almost anything in Walmart, except you can't. You can only buy certain things.
Yeah. Well, I grew up under the blue law. I'm sure you remember the blue laws.
Yes.
So it's not like I've never experienced it before, but I kind of thought we got over that and got it all out of our system. But yeah, just kind of the disparity of it all, I guess, but yeah, I agree with you, Bob. If a store was not really eligible to be open, then it's not really eligible to be open and shouldn't be open maybe, but if the store's already open well, I don't know. Something to ponder, I guess.
Well, the farther away you get from the free market, the more ponderables there are, because the more we leave to centralized planning, the more ridiculous we get in a very short time, James.
Now, if you believe that the government, whether that's state, local, or on the federal level, if you honestly and really and truly believe that they're going to come to your rescue, that they're going to save you and take care of you, well, you might want to look at some of the current things that are going on right now. And there again, like I said, if the young folks are watching, they should watch very carefully, because the federal government may or may not be able to help. The local and state government may or may not be able to help, but they're certainly not going to come charging immediately to your rescue.
True enough, James. Well, thanks.
Have a good afternoon, Bob.
Thanks for sharing, James. And now I've got Marvin on the line. Good afternoon, Marvin.
Hi, how you doing? Good afternoon.
Good.
I just happen to, I'm originally from Michigan. I've been here my entire adult life. I grew up there, but my family's still back there. And it just so happens I have the other crazy governors in Michigan. And they did the same thing, essential, non-essentials, and where they roped off Costco and Walmart. And one of the things that really got them up in arms is this planting and gardening time. I mean, if you want to plant a vegetable garden and stuff, now's the time to do it. And they they can't get seeds, they can't get garden hoses, Sam's, which is Costco back there or whatever, same thing. They literally had to take out all their tomato plants and throw them away. I mean, I just had my mom in fits. because
It's
they're
real
growing
moist.
in greenhouses because it's cold there, and then people plant it anyway. So it's just ridiculous. You can't. Central planting doesn't work very well. So anyway, it's silly. And the thing with this is Costco and stuff. You got these really wide aisles where people stay way far apart. It's like, if you want to zip by and pick up some seeds and stuff, that's actually essential. You're growing food. Back in World War II, I think they called them Liberty Gardens.
Yeah.
If I'm correct. Yeah.
They were called Victory Gardens.
Victory Gardens.
Yeah, I remember Victory Gardens. Yeah, people would plow up their front lawns and turn them into Victory Gardens.
Yeah, well, people normally do plant small vegetable gardens because fresh-grown vegetables they're really much better. Growing the vine tomatoes in particular, people grow tomatoes because they're store-bought, and well, if you ever had real tomato, you'd know. Out here, we don't. But I mean, I used to make tomato sandwiches back there, so it's ridiculous. Like I said, my mom's fit to be tied. My mom's 85. She's like, they made them throw all the tomato plants out.
What a waste!
No kidding. Anyway, that's all. That's my 2 cents on central planning and essential and non-essential for the day.
You spent your two.
You gotta laugh at this. It's our cry.
You spent your 2 cents at the right place, Marvin. Thanks for calling. Marvin and his 2 cents. Yeah, I'll give him $1 worth of change on that one. Okay, so got any other calls coming in here, Real Joe Cruz? No. Okay. So I started out talking about the quarterbacks versus the public. And by way of background, we have a legislature. There are 15 senators in our legislature. We elect them every 2 years. We expect that they are there to attend to the public interest, and their own particular personal interest should be subordinated to that of the public interest. And I'm saying we, I'm using the editorial we here. I think we expect them to be open, truthful, and transparent in their actions. So what we saw on the vote on Bill 335 fell short of that, because we had 3 senators. That would be Kelly, Marsh, Titano, and I suppose I need to explain again, don't I, Real Joe Cruz? Yeah. We have a senator whose name is Kelly Marsh, but she puts the word Titano after her name Marsh, and she puts it in parentheses. So I like to, call people by their names, and if that's what she wants to be called, that's what I'll call her. So I usually refer to as Senator Titano or Kelly Marsh Titano. But I really need to read in those parentheses. So it takes so long to say Senator parenthesis Titano close parenthesis that instead of doing that, I've assigned a sound to the parenthesis symbol. And this is how a parenthesis sounds. And that's why I refer to Senator Kelly Marsh Titano as Titano. So if you haven't been listening before and you tuned in just recently, I don't have a sore throat or anything like that. That's just one of the many conventions that we observe here on Tall Tales. And stick around for a while, you'll see some of the other conventions, and no doubt you'll really like them. So when it came time to vote on Bill 335, 3 senators, when the legislature votes by roll call. So each senator's name is called, and he can say yay or nay, depending on whether or not he favors the bill or not. But our legislature allows something that is cuckoo. Instead of voting, a senator can say pass. And the roll call goes beyond that senator all the way down to the end, and then comes back and starts over at the beginning. And everyone who had not voted because he or she, right, Real Joe Cruz? No, because they passed, name will be called again. This can happen 3 times. And it's an insidious practice when you consider that the roll is called an alphabetical order. So what it allows senators to do is pass and to see whether or not the bill is going to fail or pass. And then they can decide how they want to vote based on that, whether it's going to pass or fail. So when the vote came on for 335, when it was Taitano's turn, she was third on the list. So she didn't know how it was going to go, so she passed. And then it went on to Moylan Munya, who voted no. And then it was Paris's turn. And once again, to her, there were 1, 2, 3, 4 no's, and it was her turn to vote. Well, it only takes 8 to pass a bill, so she thought, well, maybe there'll be 7 more in addition to me. So she passed. And then we went all the way through and came back the second time, and Marsh and Paris and Therese Terlahi all voted no. Short break, and we'll come back, and I'll tell you why I think they voted no.
Everyone has a busy schedule these days, and sometimes we forget to schedule our routine dental checkup and cleaning. Don't neglect your dental health. Schedule one today with Dr. Robert Yang and his Smile Team, conveniently located at the East West Business Center on Marine Drive, Upper Tumon. Call us today at 647-8702 or 3. Again, that's 647-8702 or 647-8703. We make smiles happen.
Family Finance has been serving the people of Guam since 1959, and they'll continue to be there for you in the years to come. Whether you're looking to get a personal loan for that summer vacation or paying off those long overdue bills, Family Finance has got you covered. Apply for a personal loan from $1,000 up to $3,600 by calling Family Finance in Agutya at 475-4545, Upper Tumon at 647-5626, or in Dededo, 633-4473. Family Finance, serving the people of Guam since 1959.
Talk Tellers with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Horizon Properties. Call 646-7616 or 777-7792. You can also visit them at horizonpropertiesguam.com.
Okay, so we're back to the quarterbacks versus the public. And as I mentioned, we had 3 quarterbacks who, instead of voting, passed. That was Taitano, Paris, and Therese Terlahi. So when the voting was over, the bill failed. 9 people voted against the bill, not counting the quarterbacks. 3 senators voted in favor of the bill. And that was, that was Tina Rose Munya Barnes, one of the co-sponsors, Talina Nelson, and Amanda Shelton. So for those 3 that voted yes, although I wanted the bill to fail, I thought it was a horrible bill, and I spent a lot of time criticizing it. I did not want to see a curfew. But I take my hat off to the 3 that voted yes. That's what we pay them for. We don't pay them to vote in such a manner that we're always happy with their vote. But we do pay them to vote, and we do pay them to take their job seriously and not turn it into some kind of a game like musical chairs or like counting cards in a casino or something like that. So for the 9 that voted no and the 3 that voted yes, I have respect for them. I have no respect for the 3 passers who passed, and then when they saw that the bill was going to fail, switched over and voted no. So why would they do such a thing? Could it be that even though it was a hotly contested and highly publicized bill, they hadn't decided how they were going to vote when the roll call started, and they needed a couple more minutes to think about it? No, it's more cynical than that. Senators who do this want to, favor a particular result, but don't want to run the risk of voting wrong. So voting wrong on this bill would have been to vote in favor of it when 9 voted against it, and when it's so unpopular publicly. If there had been 5 other senators who voted yes, then the quarterbacks all could have voted yes themselves. No harm, no foul. So it's a very cynical thing to do with what we entrust senators with. We entrust them to vote to favor our own interests, not theirs. So as it turned out, the 3 passers, that's Marsh, Paris, and Therese Terlahi, are going to be able to brag, yeah, I voted against that curfew bill. But if they ever got a phone call from the governor, and I don't know if they ever will or not, but they would be in a position to say, well, Governor, I did support you. I wanted to support you. But when I saw that the bill was going to go down, then I couldn't support you anymore. Very cynical, and certainly not the kind of thing that we pay senators to do for us. Okay, I've got about 5 minutes here to the big halftime show. I've got our Carl on the line, and I've got the other Governor Leon Guerrero. So I'll take the other Governor Leon Guerrero. With the understanding that we may have to go beyond the halftime show to finish up the other Governor Leon Guerrero. So, Carl, be patient. Good afternoon, Ken.
Good afternoon. I wanted to comment on your rant. No, not rant. Your discourse back there. This is what happens when bills this important to the community get waved through without a public hearing. Because if there had been a public hearing, I doubt that the bill even would have made it out of committee. But the fact that there wasn't a public hearing, the senators got a chance to, and you heard them all say on the floor that they've received many comments from the constituents regarding this. That shows how important these bills were for the people of Guam. And I hope the senators take a lesson from this and realize that they just can't cut the public out of the process here. I mean, there's very few legitimate reasons why they should have a hearing without a public hearing, and usually they're funding bills, like they did with when the judge told the government that if they didn't pass a budget funding the landfill, that she was going to fine the government $3 million a day. Okay, that was a legitimate reason to have an emergency session. But the fact that it took him how many weeks just to call this session shows it wasn't that big of an emergency. And by that time, the people of Guam have learned social distancing and protection. So, they could have held the public hearings on these bills, and we wouldn't have gotten in this mess in the first place.
True enough, Ken. Yeah, and this is the danger that not only I, but a lot of commentators mainland discuss, that this whole Wuhan virus thing enables people to do stuff that they really wanted to do all along, but couldn't get away with it, and now they're giving it a shot.
You mean like passing a law that allows them specifically in the text of the law to bypass procurement with $142 million coming our way?
Yeah.
Something like that, maybe?
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, see, that's why none of this made sense. You know, why these bills were introduced. Number one, why the governor didn't call the special session sooner. And, you know, these two bills, they basically confirmed all the powers the governor had except for two. One, to punish people who violate her executive orders, and two, to bypass procurement regulations with $142 million of federal funding coming our way so she could dispense without any public input or oversight.
True enough, Ken.
So what I'm seeing happen here is just what you said. Politicians never letting a good crisis go to waste, using it for their own aims. And we saw that with with checkpoints as well.
Well, the thing that the other governor, Leon Guerrero, didn't bank on was that this governor, Leon Guerrero, wouldn't stand for it. So good on you, Ken.
Thank you. I mean, the way they've got those things organized, if there is a further outbreak or spread of the coronavirus here on Guam, we're probably going to trace them back to those checkpoints. Because the way those checkpoints were run, it was almost a prescription for spreading mass disease in the most efficient and effective way to maximize impact in minimal time.
True enough, Ken. Well, let's watch the big halftime show, Ken, okay?
Okay.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM.
Be careful. I'm Paul Stevens, Fox News. Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi saying protests by people in several states who want stay-at-home orders lifted could make the effects of coronavirus even worse.
Speaker Pelosi on Fox News Sunday addressed the gatherings of people outside state capitals ignoring social distancing guidelines who say it's time to get back to work. She says sheltering in place is how we get to a reopened nation.
That is really the answer. Testing, tracing, treatment, shelter in place. And I do think that it's unfortunate, but, you know, people will do what they do.
The speaker says she knows people are impatient, but the protests are something she can't understand. President Trump appeared to endorse the gatherings with simple tweets last week to liberate several states. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
Meantime, the White House still pointing a finger at China regarding the coronavirus pandemic.
We know that for a critical 6-week period of time, China used its influence at the World Health Organization to hide the virus from the world. This was a time where that virus could have been contained in Wuhan. Instead, 5 million Chinese people went out from Wuhan and propagated the virus around the world.
White House trade advisor Peter Navarro on Fox's Sunday Morning Futures. 16 people are dead, including a police officer, after a lone gunman goes on a rampage in Nova Scotia, Canada, late Saturday into early Sunday. The suspect also dead after the deadliest such attack in Canadian history. A public bus hijacking outside Dallas, Texas results in a chase and a shootout where a gunman was eventually killed and 3 police officers wounded. Police using a spike strip to stop the vehicle. The suspect continued shooting after leaving the bus. Cops returned fire, killing him. America's listening to Fox News.
Paraus utsia rerewesemmer COVID-19 ika coronavirus. Förriwisom omko sapnafeten, kope betsökkyn, kope riveriböts, me kope warnefits. Toa siriarravas purapa kökyra, tsöyran eisemmun. Esa porkotsu ike tsuffegen. Esa porkapong, esa porfarropats ike kareffegen iri arravas. Kiitsi ponnavutiunarim. Arapara betsökkyder iris. Anna fava sösö, am teiso. Me ammoge kioboge viennim. Paryn faitavin. Arapara rivets, kopo kykyo vattaparravas. Torubong murira warto sirireri veirisin. Kosa vattapa vesom, potum me avum. Torifitsipom meia kiattaporajan. Ei paraus, aitto seri atski office manielu, Macquarie Resource Center, Mekko Stationin, Choice Broadcasting. Kiriso Zabur.
Small businesses reopening in Germany as Europe's #1 economy takes a step out of a coronavirus lockdown.
Germany's Chancellor Angela Merkel says the country has achieved, quote, a fragile intermediate success in its fight against the coronavirus. Europe's largest economy now easing a nationwide lockdown. Small shops can reopen this week, along with car dealerships, bicycle shops and bookstores. Chancellor Merkel's cautious approach has been broadly praised, with Germany counting far fewer fatalities than many smaller European countries. In London, Simon Owen, Fox News.
Meantime, many states looking to increase their COVID-19 testing ability before relaxing stay-at-home orders. Nebraska GOP Governor Pete Ricketts telling Fox News his state is making some progress on testing.
We've tried a variety of creative things like pooling samples in our public health lab, and that has allowed us to be able to expand the number of tests we can do. And we're looking at different channels of ways to be able to expand it, different types of tests, and so forth.
Nebraska, one of 7 states that has not issued a statewide stay-at-home order. The National Football League kicking off its virtual off-season programs on Monday, operating from afar during the COVID-19 pandemic.
The Dallas Cowboys, Carolina Panthers, and other NFL teams with new head coaches can kick off their 3-week virtual off-season today that will allow squads to hold voluntary classroom instruction, workouts, and non-football educational programs on various online platforms. Other teams can start their programs April 27th, running through May 15th. This setup instituted to allow for off-season business to continue despite all NFL teams shutting down their facilities to combat the spread of the coronavirus. All 32 clubs will also be busy today working out their remote setups as they conduct a mock run of the virtual draft set to kick off on Thursday night. Matt Napolitano, Fox News.
Monday early trading seeing Asian markets mixed, shares rising in Hong Kong and Shanghai but falling in Tokyo. I'm Paul Stevens and this is Fox News.
As we stand up to coronavirus by standing back with social distancing, Bank Pacific reminds you that you can come to the bank without going to the bank. Use many of our other delivery platforms like online banking at bankpacific.com, accessing cash at our ATMs, shopping with our debit cards. For businesses, we have secure cash and check drop windows, and we are employing a new smarter mobile app with remote deposit capture in the next few weeks. We're all in this together, and together we will win. Bank Pacific. Brothers but branches, we place roots. Member FDIC.
Guam is home to strong and resolved people. As an island, we regularly deal with the destructive forces of nature together. We at Security Title know that when the storm passes, our families and neighbors will join together to clear the debris, to barbecue whatever is thawing in our freezers, and get back to the business of wholeheartedly living our lives. As our island struggles with the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, let us remember that this too shall pass.
Cocoa Coffee Company is now available at Circle K. Single origin coffee beans carefully sourced and locally roasted to give you the freshest cup of coffee Guam has to offer. Grab a cup that's brewed every 30 minutes or purchase a bag of the locally roasted whole beans. Flavors now serving: light medium roasted Ethiopia and medium dark roasted Jamaican Blue Mountain. Exclusively available at Circle K. With every Cocoa Coffee Company purchase, a portion of the proceeds will go towards the Cocoa Recovery Program.
Talk Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
After enjoying that big halftime show demonstrated to an entirely empty stadium today, we're back here on Tall Tales, and I've noticed that I've got a call here from another Joe. Ken LG wants to ride the Ferris wheel again, And I expect that our Carl is sitting close to his phone with his finger near the keypad, waiting for the line to clear a little bit. So when these two, after these two have had their 15 minutes of fame here on Tall Tales, our Carl, you could call in. So I'm going to go to another Joe first, and then I'll come back to you, Ken. Good afternoon, another Joe.
Yeah, well, I have to agree with Ken LG that public hearings are important, and it would have taken a lot of doubt out of the minds of the senators as to just how important it would be not to play like at this voting game, as you say. I don't know what you want to call it, musical chairs of passing, or maybe they look at it as Russian roulette.
That's a good one, yeah. Legislative Russian roulette, yeah.
Ultimately, the number one priority of elected official is to get reelected, unless, of course, it's part of their plan that they've already accomplished what they want to accomplish. So, having said that, my guess is that these senators who pass still have an interest in being reelected, and they still have something on their platform that they want to accomplish, which is kind of scary because I don't know what that is, whether it be pro-abortion or
well, a couple of them are environmental wackos, so that could be it. And by the way, another Joe, when they do this passing trick, this legislative Russian roulette, what they think they're doing is enhancing their chances of reelection, because they think that if they're clever in the way they cast their votes, they won't have to pay for a bad vote.
Do you think that it's going to come down?
And they don't think that anybody's going to call them on it like I have. So
do you think it's going to be competitive this voting season? It'll come down to between those even competing amongst themselves in those senators in the legislature. Do you think it'll be really close, this election?
Well, it's very possible, because my sense is that, notwithstanding the abject expressions of joy when we elected 10 females to our legislature. Remember, we couldn't talk about anything else for about 6 weeks after the election. I think there's some really serious buyer's remorse nowadays, because I think that people have figured out that what they got was not all that great. So.
Yeah, we'll have to see what happens. Okay, Bob, thanks a lot. I'll wait to see what the Ken LG has to say. Thank you.
Okay, always good to talk to you, another Joe. Okay, Ken, second ride on the Ferris wheel.
Yes, this time around I wanted to talk about testing and the kits out of South Korea.
Okay.
Because the governor drew a line in the sand for herself, and there's no basis for her declaration that the South Korean kits are not good for Guam. I mean, the federal government's got two orders. They got an order of 600,000. They got an order of 750,000. So you would think that if it's good enough for the federal government, it would be good enough for Guam.
Yeah.
That's the first point. And the second point is we're not really going to be able to be wise managers, wise leaders in this pandemic until we start getting a better handle on what we're actually dealing with, because we don't know. I mean, we've tested less than 1,000 people. South Korea's tested 500,000 people, so there's a reason why they're doing a better job managing the situation in South Korea, because they have the data, they have the ability to track outbreaks and stuff. What are we doing? We're having the National Guard and the Guam police spread it as far and wide as they can, and we're testing 7 people a day. Really? So we don't know what we don't know. So, you know, the fact that all our hospitals are not busy and we don't have bodies piling up in the streets like they do in some countries, I think the people of Guam have done a great job adhering to the first and common sense requirements of stay home and social distance.
I do too, Ken.
And you know, we see it everywhere. I had to go and pick up some food today, and everybody in line outside of Payless was 7 to 10 feet apart waiting to get in. And once you were inside Payless, everybody was keeping their distance. You know, so it shows that the people are following those wise rules and regulations and suggestions. But we still come back to the fact that we need testing, because before the governor goes to her next plan to open up the economy, it would be kind of nice if we had more than a few hundred people tested. And that's where I think she's making a big mistake, that she's already talking about lifting the stay at home without really getting a better handle on where we are. Because look at the cases on the Teddy Roosevelt. The numbers keep climbing.
And that's
probably the last one I saw.
That's probably the best laboratory available anywhere in the world.
Yeah, and the part that was so concerning is the reports that the young, healthy people are asymptomatic, but they're infected and they're spreading the disease for wider and longer periods of time. So it's not like the typical flu virus where people become contagious when they become symptomatic. You know, so what if we have the same situation here? We don't know. And that's why, you know, I'm hoping that this committee that she's put together for the economy does the smart thing and encourage massive, widespread, voluntary testing. Because right now they're limiting to testing to people who they have real strong reason to believe may have been exposed. But with the airline shut down, those numbers have dropped dramatically. So who are we testing now? You know? So what we need to do is we need to get that wider sample. And just imagine if they had kits at every village mayor's office, so there wouldn't be long lines and huge crowds of people building up, you know, around the testing areas, because, you know, you can maintain the social distancing and still get an effective sample around the island that way. And it would be a smart thing to do before we start talking about things like lifting the stay-at-home and starting to open up the economy. They were talking, you know, I heard part of the conversation earlier, and someone was citing numbers back at you about churches. It's not just churches that are doing that. They had a group of 300 or 400 kids from some college up New York or New Jersey that went to spring break down in Florida, and 75% of them tested positive after coming back from Florida. You know, so it's the large crowds where we have the biggest risk. And I think that once we start doing the testing and start understanding what the vectors of infection are, and hopefully they won't be traced to 90% of them won't be traced to the 4 checkpoints, but I kind of doubt it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was my thing, because, you know, the way they're executing these executive orders doesn't make sense. You know, I was inside Payless, and there are things that you can't buy because they're non-essential items. I can't buy flip-flops because one of my flip-flops broke, and I was trying to find them, but they were marked off in Kmart as being non-essential. And you got all these kids that are home from school. but you can't buy school supplies, even though the teachers have put the lesson plans up on the internet. The entire school supply section over at Kmart was closed down as non-essential. But, you know, at the same time, alcohol was for sale. Outdoor tools like chainsaws are for sale. You know, so how did they determine what was essential and what wasn't? We have 31,000 kids at home, and guess what is non-essential? Toys. You can't go into the toy aisles.
Well, you know, as per my conversation with James, this is exactly what you can expect when you divorce the free market from commerce. When you get into any kind of central planning, you wind up with silly results like this. This is a good example.
Yeah, I was hoping when she announced her forming of the Economic Council, I was hoping that it was going to be broader based and include more people from the business community, because basically you have a group of insiders, a group of bank employees, and a group of government officials. That's about the most, what is the word I'm looking for?
Incestuous?
No. They're just like inside a bubble. You know, they don't live the real life. You know, they're those people that are in that committee, for the most part, they're not sending people home. They're not shutting down businesses. They're not juggling fixed expenses against non-income. These are the things that needed to be represented on that Economic Council. We needed to have, you know, a broad base of people, not just representing businesses, but representing the workers as well.
Well, you have a bank president on that council, Ken.
I bet that bank president, he's probably a nice guy from everything I've heard, but he hasn't lived a hard luck life. That 64% of the people of Guam who both incomes combined in a household make less than $50,000 a year. You know, so, you know, his views are going to be jaded and insulated from the views of the people that work in these companies, that work in these hotels, that work in these service industries, that work in these mom and pop businesses. I mean, I have a friend who has a business, and I don't know if he was planning to apply for the payroll protection program so he could keep his employees on. I don't know if he got on or not. I don't know if he's one of the 508 that made it, but he really wants to keep his people working and find things that they can do, even though they're not revenue generating things, because he has a retail operation, but there are other things they could be doing in the business as well if he had the money to pay for it. You know, and so these are the types of people that needed to be added to the Economic Council, just to make sure that when they put together plans, they're putting together plans are going to have a wide positive ripple effect.
I agree,
the economy Ken. And the people that work there. I mean, I feel for the people who rent, but you know, if the people who rent get that moratorium on paying rent, then I feel sorry for the people that have to pay the mortgages, because even though the governor issues a declaration there's going to be no evictions, well, I don't see her issuing a declaration there will be no foreclosures, as if the Bank of New York would take the governor of Guam seriously in a foreclosure situation, you know. And you know, it's all a house of cards. You can't strengthen one leg of one card without doing something to affect all the other cards. Otherwise, you just bring the collapse of the house faster. And that's what I'm worried about with this council. It's inbred. When I say it's inbred, it's just, you know, it's the choir.
Well, you know, I had my own nominee for that council, but when I checked with him, the real Joe Cruz said that he thought he could do more good here on Tall Tales than in that council, but I'll work on him a little more.
Yeah, please do that, because we need to get people with a broad range of work and life experiences.
Well, we need real people. That's why I chose the real Joe Cruz. Yeah, real people.
I agree, because that's the only way. I mean, what we're seeing right now with the way the management team, the emergency team is put together, that's what gave us these checkpoints on 4 roads with scheduled times and only part of the day and maps on how to bypass the checkpoint. But in the meantime, anybody that drives through, we're going to maximize the opportunity to spread the infection. You know, the existing emergency council is the one that said you can't buy school supplies, but you can buy a car. You can't buy slippers, but you can buy tires. You can't buy beauty supplies, but you can buy alcohol.
I'll drink to
maybe
that.
That's a counterweight. Maybe that's a counterweight.
Yeah, I'll drink to that,
so,
Ken.
So that's why we need to get more common sense. But as Thomas Paine himself said, common sense is the least common thing of all.
True enough.
Especially in a high-stress environment like a worldwide pandemic and economic collapse.
True enough, Ken. Well, thanks for climbing back on the Ferris wheel one more time.
All right. I look forward to the rest of the show and what the other callers have to say.
Okay, thank you. Okay, our Carl, the lines are free, so you may dial 888-8255 and address our entire international radio listening audience, as may anyone else out there. 888-TALK, and you will have your 15 minutes of, well, at least 15 seconds of fame addressing the entire international radio listening audience. This is our Carl, right? Good afternoon, our Carl.
Hey, Bob. Good afternoon.
Sir.
I was just having such a good time listening to all your callers that I kind of lost track of my own call. Yeah, when I was listening to your comments about the vote on that, that the senators had on the, what is the name of that?
The curfew bill.
The curfew bill, yeah. I had a little mind glitch there. Yeah, it brought to mind a quote by Groucho Marx. These are my principles, and if you don't like them, I have others.
True enough.
Yeah, and it's true. I might disagree with the 3 senators who voted yes, but they stood by their principles, and they didn't play games. I totally disagree with Bernie Sanders, but I have to respect the fact that he's pretty consistent. I mean, through decades, he's been pretty much a full-on, almost a communist.
Classic, what you see is what you get, yeah.
Yeah, and which is the same as Trump. You might not like what you hear or what you see, but at least they're not playing games. With Bernie, he's not going the Antonio Gramsci route, and kind of testing the waters until they're in power, and then, little by little, things come out that you weren't aware of. But Bernie is Bernie, and what you see is what you get. So I have to respect him for that.
Absolutely.
And, I was listening to an interview on Jim Bohannon last night where they were talking about the potential of a mortgage meltdown because of this situation, people not being able to pay their mortgages and things just cascading, as Ken said, like a house of cards. And that's a very real possibility. So, people are annoyed, because what if we do it too soon? I think we need to also be worried about what if we do it too late and this house of cards starts collapsing in on itself. The consequences of a worldwide, a national and international financial and economic meltdown would be catastrophic. I'm already hearing about, I have a friend of mine who works in a supermarket, and he mentioned about them their buyers ordering 20 or 30 cases of an item and only being given 2 or 3 because the canning factories they don't have the personnel there. So they're not pumping this stuff out as much as they used to. So, little by little, we're going to start seeing the shelf stock dwindle. And then people will have less stock to buy. And then, there's the panic buying and, all these other things that just can build to a critical mass to the point where really, really bad things can happen. So, yeah, there are, as in any case, the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic, the greatest estimate I heard was from Jordan Peterson, and he estimated over 120 million around the world died from that pandemic, and that's a horrible thing. But there were also catastrophic consequences for the Great Depression. Over a quarter of the United States were unemployed for over 10 years, and that had serious consequences. People going hungry and in some cases starving. So either way, if we if we do it too fast or we do it too slow, there's going to be consequences. And I think personally, at this stage, we've learned enough about the disease that we can equip ourselves, as Dr. Fauci said. He predicted that there would very possibly be a second, maybe even a third wave. But he said the advantage we have is we understand more about the illness now, and we're better equipped to deal with it and to advise people who needs to be very careful and who can afford to, go back to work and get the economy rolling again. Whereas in the early stage of this, thanks to the Chinese Communist Party, we knew virtually nothing about this disease. So anyway, that's my two bits. Is I think we've reached a stage where we really need to seriously look at getting this economy rolling, because the consequences of waiting too long are catastrophic.
Okay, Carl. Well, James was one of I think he was my first caller. He had a 2 cents worth he wanted to contribute, but you've really upped the ante. You're all the way up to 25 cents. 2 bits.
Well, everyone that's called, we've got the advantage that we've got very intelligent. You've got a very intelligent listening audience. Absolutely. Everybody that calls, I learn something from. I might agree or disagree, but I learned something new. So, you have that advantage. You really set the bar high for your to join your listening audience. So it's always very interesting listening to all your callers.
Thank you, Carl.
Thank you.
Yeah, the international listening audience, radio listening audience of Tall Tales is one of the most intelligent groups of people in the world. I've got one on the line here. I've got Romeo on the line. So, Romeo, right after the 7th inning stretch, we'll get you on the air.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Horizon Properties. Call 646-7616 or 777-7792. Or you can also visit them at horizonpropertiesguam.com.
So here we are, 7th inning stretch, Wrigley Field in Chicago, empty baseball park, empty field, empty Chicago, full crew here at Tall Tales. We're not going anywhere. And we've got Romeo on the line. Good afternoon, Romeo.
Hey, good afternoon, Bob. Listen, I have a question. I heard you guys recently, or a few minutes ago, discussing the Economic Advisory Task Force.
Yeah.
I'm actually working on a blog post for this evening, and I'm trying to identify the individuals who are named to that. Where can I find that listing at?
I saw it in one of the news outlets just a couple days ago, Romeo.
That's what I heard, and I haven't been able to locate that article. But I understand former Senator Dennis Rodriguez is on that.
That's right. And
this makes it very interesting. You know, all the convoluted actions and the decisions by our governor and the legislature from the beginning of this has really created a lot of confusion in the community. People just can't seem to get a grip as to what it is she's doing. And critics like myself included have just assumed that she's clueless, that they don't know what they're doing, that they're just, winging it. But what if they do know what they're doing? What if, in fact, what they are doing is what is being warned about across the world in this pandemic, with governments that use it as an opportunity to enrich themselves? Now, when you begin, and I've done the legwork on this, I'm trying to work on this post for tonight. It's pretty complex, and people don't like reading too many words, so breaking it down simply has been difficult. But everything that they have done from the beginning of this pandemic can be traced from one step to the other to one thing: creating an environment under which this governor and her cronies can operate without oversight, without commitment to transparency or accountability, in order to get their hands on tens of millions of dollars. And when you look at the players who are involved, every last one of them are nefarious individuals who have been called into question, if not convicted of felonies. And these are the men and women who congregate and conclave at Adaloop under the oversight of Joshua Tenorio, who sits in the background quietly while Lou runs around in the front. But he's handling this, and the individuals that are involved. Testing is going to happen, but it was unreasonable that the governor would say no to one of the largest biotech firms that provides testing kits for 120 countries, including more than 250 million tests for the United States. And then to accept them, FEMA has boots on the ground. They are going to begin testing stations next week. It is not a GovGuam operation per se, as much as it is FEMA and the military taking the lead and letting GovGuam run the flag to save face. But one of the most amazing aspects is Dennis Rodriguez is involved with his Total Guam, the medical services industry, as is Vic Sobti, who is the only guy bringing in supplies that are not under threat of confiscation. Every little thing ties back to one or the next one following. They have been trying to create an environment wherein competition for PPEs, the protective personal equipment, medical supplies, is eliminated or discouraged, so that it's funneled through one or two individuals who just happen to be a part of this cabal that meets it, or that met at Adaloop and is putting this together. When the purchasing does come, it'll come through a politically connected medical service. But the more surprising thing is when government of Guam expends $1, they're able to claim 3 times that amount from the feds. And anything above their cost, they can keep. And this is GovGuam. I don't think the private vendors will have anything above the cost that they can keep or put back into the bank for GovGuam. But they are actually discounting our health care and this pandemic for profit at the expense of people's lives and their health, not to mention the economy. I just wanted to put that out there.
Pretty heavy duty, Romeo. I'm really looking forward to that blog. It sounds like it's going to be your blogs are always pretty intriguing, but this sounds like it's going to be really a whiz bang.
Dude, it is, and it's not speculation. In order to, I keep getting, I kind of think in patterns, right? So I've been seeing these disparate packets of data and information coming in, and eventually you connect the dots. So then I went around basically trying to verify them. There are individuals who cannot speak out because of the line of work or the profession that they're in, who are just livid at what they see happening. You know, how people are profiteering at the expense of individuals' lives and their health. Instead of helping, it's all about money. But again, when you look at it, everything, why do you want a curfew? It wasn't about the curfew. The National Guard is the cover for potential prosecution down the line for this governor, because all she has to do is say, saving lives, public emergency. That's why you have the half, how do you say this, a half buttocks public emergency strategy rollout. Just enough to say, hey, see, feds, it was a public emergency. I was doing this to save lives. But the idea, I mean, you guys talk about this every day. You woke me up to this. The checkpoints being absolutely useless. Does COVID take a break for lunch? You know, why is it so on again, off again? The National Guard, who's headed by a woman who owes Lou, ties into this. These are individuals who broke her own executive orders, or whatever she wants to call them, because they weren't even properly done. There was no enforceability. Why? All for money. From the very beginning, they understood there would be that Trump was going to roll out a massive assistance program for the states and territories. And they were on it from the beginning, not for the health and safety of the people of Guam, but for the profit of their pockets.
You know, Romeo, this kind of reminds me of Watergate and Deep Throat. Follow the money.
That's exactly it. And the money, when Trump allocated, that bill passed, and we could see the money, that's what they were able to track. And just asking the individuals involved. My question is, how do we get to the OIG? And the FBI won't get involved unless a formal complaint is filed. And no one at the federal level is going to want to take on this kind of thing at this stage in the game, not until things are wrapped up. But this is, it's just, like I said, it's not just people's health, their mental health, it's our businesses. This is killing the economy. And a very, very small group of people are going to profit from this. I mean, look at all the restaurants that are gone. Shirley's, Tony Roma's. These guys are gone. They're wrapped up. They've closed out. What's going to replace this? When is it going to happen? But no one cares. There's no leadership on the business end of it. The fact that Dennis Rodriguez is on the Economic Recovery Council, this is a guy who was responsible for not paying FICA taxes that the federal government went after. He took the money from the employees and put the money in his bank account, not in the government bank account. He boasts when he ran for office that he was the GM of his family's company. Well, that was the company. That was the company that lost their brand license for Sonia Riquel because they were cheating them. He's never created a job. When he had one working with Senator Tina Munoz Barnes, he never showed up to work to collect his $40,000. And he's on the Economic Recovery Council. This is ludicrous. It's just ludicrous. But his company is mentioned in all the briefings daily with FEMA about running those test stations, and yet not one senator like Therese Tlahi can find out any information. How much are we paying for these services, you know?
Yeah.
It's frustrating. It gets me really upset. But I just wanted to get that out there and talk to you today.
Well, I'm really glad you called, Romeo. Now, I have an answer to your question. My staff has alerted me to the fact that it's the Marianas, as you were, the Daily Post for April 18 that has a story under the headline, Governor Names Members of Economic Recovery Panel.
On the 18th, April 18th?
April 18th in the Post.
Okay, I want to find out who else is on there, because the names that have come to surface that are connected to this testing, I mean, you put off the testing at the expense of this disease spread, whether it's a flu-like condition or something more severe, at this point is irrelevant. the idea, it's people's health. You put it off until you can acquire the amount of tests that you need to run through a private company so you can pay your fat cat friends. That's something that deserves, some attention. But the names that are involved are Joe Cruz from PacAir, Casamar, Big Sobti, from Thailand, bringing in Chinese-produced goods. His partners, Anne-Marie Munya, Dennis Rodriguez, who's involved with Gil Shinhara, i.e. Amanda Shelton. I mean, it's just intricate, and it's all connected, Bob.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all connected. If I had a pretty face, I would do a video. But, I'm trying to write because I got a face for radio. And trying to put this down in simple terms that people will actually read is really, really difficult because it's so complex. There's so many layers. There's just so many layers. And you can deny one or two things or say they're a coincidence, but when you take a step back and you see the big picture, there's no way this is coincidence. And we here are sitting on the sidelines just waiting. They can't focus on the economic development plan. They can't focus on the business community. They can't focus on school. They can't do the basics. One of the biggest things that just occurred to me, like in a pandemic response plan, one of the first things that they should do is prepare for corruption that is often associated with emergencies.
That should be part of the
That could be
plan.
one of the reasons why she never put together an emergency response team.
Yeah. Romeo, I got to go. I'm really glad you called. You gave us a lot to think
Thank you for
about.
letting me vent.
Okay. I'll be looking for that.
I'll look for that info.
I'll be looking for that.
Have a good one.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so I've got Frenchie is first in line, and then somebody who will tell us that we don't know Jack down the home stretch.
As we continue to protect our families and community from the effects of COVID-19, GTA would like to encourage you to use our online services or to call us. If you'd like to pay your bill or need assistance with services, you can chat with us online, connect with us on Facebook, call us at 644-4482, or send us an email at ask@gta.net. Here at GTA, we are committed to keep you and your family safe, healthy, and connected. GTA, we start with you.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
So here we are, heading down the home stretch, Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky, empty grandstand, empty track. So I got about 15 minutes here to wrap up another exciting, elucidating, educational episode of Tall Tales. Before I call on Frenchie, I'm just going to name the folks on the governor's economic, as you were, the governor's recovery council, since we spent a fair amount of time talking about them with Romeo. The lead person on the panel is Ricky Hernandez, from the Guam Economic Development Authorities, the deputy director, David John, GIDA chairman, Joaquin Cook, Bank of Guam president, Joseph Bradley, chief economist, Bank of Guam, Christine Boleto, Guam Chamber of Commerce chairperson, Holly Rustick, Guam Chamber board member, Pilar Laguana, Guam Visitors Bureau president, CEO, Dr. Mike Cruz, state surgeon, Dr. Thane Hancock, U.S. Senators for Disease Control and Prevention, and Tony Babauta, Governor's Chief of Staff, and Lieutenant Governor Josh Tenorio. Those are the people that are going to guide us back to recovery. Okay, so with no further ado, as it were, let's go to Frenchie. Good afternoon, Frenchie.
You see, no further ado or no further adieu?
My French is always better in the morning, Frenchie, than it is in the afternoon, remember?
I remember telling you that, yeah. I think in order to kind of understand what's happening to us here on our small island, it's interesting to see what's happening all around the world. And basically with this pandemic, what you have had almost three types of reactions from governments, either national or local governments. You had the ones that were completely taken aback, were not prepared, or for political reason decided to ignore the signs that we were facing something serious. And basically, those governments ended up confining their people. Then you had governments that were very well understanding of what was going on, but they don't have the economical means to really go out and get all the equipment that's necessary, like masks, gloves, respirators, and so on. And so they kind of did it on the cheap, but they actually ended up having some pretty good results because they addressed the issues early on. And then, of course, you have the good students who understood right away. They were prepared because they had seen this kind of thing. We have seen H1N1, we have seen H1N5, and so on and so on. I mean, there is a pandemic almost every year. Many of them come from China, which leads to another debate that we can go over. And unfortunately for us on Guam, I think the governor, the little Lupoleon, she saw what was going on. She totally ignores the fact, and we've seen it over and over again that they were advertising in Korea and Japan for tourists to come as late as March, and then they were saying that everything was hanky-dory on Guam and we didn't have to worry. To basically falling in the categories of government that were not ready, and where now we have to lock people in their home. We have governments like Sweden, Switzerland, Austria, and Taiwan, Korea to a lesser extent because they kind of started with one late train, but they caught up real fast. Or even Singapore that did very well, and where the people are confined only to the minimum degree. Taiwan people, the restaurants are open, the economy is moving, and they are tracking people that are potential risk, and they have done a lot of tests. Now, I think Lou, and I don't agree with Romeo very often because he comes from a totally different spectrum, but I think he's right in that there is a little bit of nefarious side in the Lou administration. During her campaign, I warned people over and over again, even though the media on Guam totally ignore it, that the governor, if she was elected, and she was, had huge conflict of interest. She was the president of the largest bank on Guam, and she has many conflicts of interest as the head of the executive with the payroll for the government of Guam, for the pensions for the government of Guam, which are not controlled by the BOG. There are a lot of issues, and we have seen how slow this administration has been in how would you say, distributing money when we get it. Earlier last year was when the Department of the Interior sent us money every year. The money is distributed very slow, and one can ask, what is the interest of this administration to leave that public money in the Bank of Guam accounts for so long when you know that the bank's rating are based on the amount of money that are deposited in their accounts. So you have a lot of issues that are coming there, and we have no clear answer. There is nepotism. We know nepotism leads to corruption. We know through Candid, for example, that the previous administration had made some contingency plan, which obviously have not been put in place by this one. We get a lot of value lecture from all kind of people today in the PDN. You had a typical letter from a wonderful person that thought the choke points were a great way to control the virus. So we have a lot of issues there. I don't know if you see it the same way or if you have a different view of this.
I see it the same way, Romeo.
Yeah.
Yeah, Frenchie.
So,
Yeah.
but I think Ken see it well. I think in this case, Romeo is raising a lot of good questions, which frankly we do not have good answers. I mean, we're getting a lot of communication, but most of that communication is BS. You know, CNMI is going to be able to test their whole population. Granted, they have 100,000 people less than we do, but they're ahead of the curve, and they probably will be able to restart the economy in good conditions better than we do because we haven't made the effort. And what reasons are we being given for not doing the effort? It's another BS reason. All the FDA is not approved. The FDA has approved those tests from Korea. And Korea is probably the closest place we can get them in a fast way. So what's going on? You know, there is a lot more questions that are not being answered. And the only thing we get is value lecturing. We are getting lecture on values, and we have a government that encourages deletion, neighbors calling police on neighbors. I mean, this sounds like the Maoist government during the Cultural Revolution. This is very bad for a society, and this is what we're getting right now. It's really not a pretty picture.
Agreed, Frenchie. Agreed.
And I agree with you 100% as far as the First Amendment of the right to worship, and the government should not interfere in that right. And I think Martinez is totally missing the point because he sees it only from what the propaganda is telling him. And a lot of people are brainwashed. You know, they don't understand the consequence of some of the choices that were made. And the choices that were made were the worst choice because we were not proactive up front. And I've said that several times in the last few weeks, but that's where we're going. So I'll let, I guess we still have 5 minutes for Jack to tell you we don't know we don't know Jack.
Yeah, Jack gets to the point of us not knowing Jack pretty quick, so I think he can handle it. Well, thanks again. Always a pleasure to talk to you, Frenchie.
All right, Bob, and you have a nice evening. Bye-bye.
Okay, let us have it, Jack. Tell us we don't know Jack.
Happy Easter, Bob.
Thank you.
I just want to say that Frenchie kind of reminds me of a Alexis de Tocqueville. And I think his words will carry way past this epidemic outbreak. And that list that you read, you know, hopefully, I hope not, but probably that's probably the 2021, 2022 who's who on the federal indictment list. I just wanted to say I've been listening in, and you know, everybody's talking about testing, but which tests are they talking about? Are they talking about the swab test or the pinprick test? Because both of them are different tests for different reasons. And so, you know, I think we need the swab test more, but we also need the pinprick because, you know, it's my belief that this virus has already hit the island prior to. And so, you know, one way to test if it did is, you know, through the pinprick test. So
that test that test for antibodies, is that it, Jack?
Yeah, that one. That'll be a good, you know, that'll be a good thing to do too. So when you talk about testing, you need, I think, both testing, especially for our location and things like that. But yeah, I have to agree that I kind of was laughing. I'm just biding my time. We're just, we're way behind the curve here. And, we might be hit by a second what Carlos was speaking about. So, I just wanted to stay safe, want everybody to stay safe. I don't really agree with the protesting that was happening down there that Ray Gibson did. I mean, he has social media. He has his own
Hey, Jack,
station.
Jack, bite your tongue. It wasn't just Ray Gibson. It was me, too.
Yeah, I saw you there. I'm just hoping, I'm praying for you, too, I'm just hoping that you pull through this also, because, China put this virus out just to get at you. You've been making a lot of noise against socialism and communism, so they're targeting you. They're targeting our Monomkos, the history keeper.
It's hard, Jack, it's hard to argue with someone who seems to be so well informed.
Yeah, but I just wanted to also bring in that if we see the casualties of catastrophes and disasters, the first thing is always the truth and stuff like that. And we know in our last major hit of a typhoon, there was a lot of corruptions, the bus stop, the telephone poles breaking at in the middle. There's a lot of stuff that goes on because there's people with, ulterior motives that are making a quick buck on this stuff. So, we just need to be prudent. I mean, we have a lot of smart, common people here. And, if something like, Frenchie says, and, Frenchie comes from and it takes someone like outside the culture to come in and point things that are wrong, because it's not that we don't recognize it, it's that we're just used to it. And it's nice to hear Frenchie, say things and point things point blank.
Gotta go, Jack.
Listen, Bob, God bless, and have a great evening.
Adios.
They're still talking. I'm Paul Stevens, Fox News. Congress and the White House still negotiating on more than $400 billion in additional